Where to begin with the disaster that was the day for the Dallas Cowboys? I mean, the Packers were brilliant, but the Cowboy defense led by Dan Quinn, which was the backbone of this team, they were allowing 18.5 points per game. That was 5th in the league this year. They allowed 48 points yesterday. Granted, one of them was a pick six, but even so, it's the most in the 67 playoff games the Cowboys have played in their franchise's history. And we're sort of all over this thing this morning, and the conversation has jumped in a million different directions. And D. Wood has jumped into the conversation. Dan is in Tampa Bay. Schefter is on the way. Chris Canty today as well. But D. Wood, let's hear from you this morning. We have been trying to assign blame, and candidly, it was such an epic meltdown for the Cowboys. There has been plenty to go around. But if someone were to ask you this morning, what was the single biggest reason the Cowboys got blown out in their own building yesterday, what was it?
Matt LaFleur's brilliance. I mean, think about this, Greeny. The Green Bay Packers are the youngest team in the National Football League. Matt LaFleur had those guys ready to go against a team that was the most dominant team at home in the National Football League. Literally, the Dallas Cowboys were just absolutely throttling teams at home. And he had that team ready to go. The one thing I said last week going into this game is that the Dallas Cowboys are a front-running team. They jump on you early and then they steamroll you. Well, Matt LaFleur had those guys ready to go. They jumped out early and they never looked back. From the scheme, the preparation, he coached circles around Dan Quinn and company yesterday. And I just got to tip my hat to Matt LaFleur, man, because that's not an easy task. Those guys were prepared and ready to go.
That's well said. And the and company, of course, is the head coach, Mike McCarthy. And so let me come to you on that, Dan Orlovsky. This was not the kind of game, and you could see the shock in the face and the tone of Jerry Jones after the game yesterday. This was not a decision he was expecting to have to make this quickly. I don't think any of us were expecting that. This did not feel like the kind of game from which you just run everything back. We bring back the coaching staff. We bring back the quarterback. We just bring everything back. What's the big change that you make this morning, Dan Orlovsky, if you own the Dallas Cowboys?
Everyone, I restart everything. Green, I was born in 1983. That's the most dominant and embarrassing loss I've seen the Cowboys have for a good football team. Just to put this game into context, so anybody that matters, like the most important pieces, I'm changing it all. I'm changing it all. To put it into context, this game, okay? Because a lot of people are running from the truth in this one. This is the highest expectations the Cowboys have had in probably 3 decades. Rightfully so. Okay, this is a football team that had won 15 straight games at home. They were averaging almost 40 points per game at home. They had a quarterback who, rightfully so, was in the MVP conversation this year. They had a wide receiver who was in the Offensive Player of the Year conversation. They had 3 offensive linemen make All-Pro. They got a tight end in Ferguson who's one of the best young tight ends in the NFL. They got a guy in Micah Parsons who many people say is in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. They got 15 Pro Bowlers, who's the second most in the NFL. And they got dump trucked. Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott, when they play San Francisco and Green Bay, are 0-5. They lose by an average of 13 points in that game. They got to restart everything. And for everyone that's going to say, well, what are you going to go to? I don't know right now. The game happened 18 hours ago. But there's no way that people in that building, the way that those most important decision makers are in that place, can sit here and think in their soul that they can go win a big game when it matters the most. No way. I restart everything.
Everybody ready to dive in. I'll get back to you, D, what I promised. Rex, if your inclination tends to be to defend the coach. And Mike McCarthy, there are ways to defend him. He's won 12 games in the last 3, each of the last 3 regular seasons. There are very few head coaches who can do that. That is success in and of itself. Yeah. If you were the owner of the team this morning, would you make a coaching change?
I would not. And, I mean, we can't just ignore the fact that this man's won 12 games 3 years in a row. We can't ignore it, all right, against a pretty dang good conference. But the thing is, too, he put himself out there. He said, I'm going to be the play caller. I'm going to do all that. We saw their offense really improve, made strides, okay? The thing that they got to look at is how are we going to, like, championship medal is won games in December and January. how are we going to get there? To me, you don't get there by getting destroyed at the line of scrimmage, especially defensively. Like, are you kidding me? We've got to have a personnel thing. We've got to bring in a linebacker. We've got to bring in some maybe bigger bodies up front. But we just can't take an ass whipping. And to me, that's the thing. Dan Quinn is an outstanding coach. Okay, he really is. But he needs to do it from a lead. We've got to get how we saw it in Atlanta. What happened? Major collapse when in a Super Bowl.
Well, they had the lead. Yeah,
they did.
Yeah.
And then they had a major collapse. We've got to look at how are we going to get there?
It's hard.
Go ahead.
It's hard to make an argument against what Dan is saying, except for it's just crazy. You have useful pieces. Your answer is blow up everything? I agree that if you get beat offensively, defensively, and on special teams, and several years in a row, you have embarrassing exits. Last year, they were not better than the team that they lost to. That's fine. You expect that sometimes you're going to be able to win those games. They're not able to do it. I get where Dan's coming from, but I stop at the quarterback. When you start talking about getting rid of everybody, and it's not just, I get Dan's point that arguing, well, it could get worse, well, you're not going to win a Super Bowl. I get that that's not a legitimate argument to keep holding on to. But Dak is good, bordering on great. The trouble with it is he needs a little bit of help. There are quarterbacks in this league that need a little bit of help. There's only 3 or 4 guys.
I'm sorry. He has it, Neek.
He didn't have it
just
yesterday.
But because he was a big part of the problem, and his defense was awful. But he just said it. He's got C.D. Lamb and Jake Ferguson and Tony Pollard and 3 All-Pros on the offensive line.
They need to show up.
They got to give him $60 million. They got to give $30 million or 20-something million to C.D. Lamb. They got to give 20-something million to Mike McCarthy. This was their chance.
The hardest thing to find in this league and the most difficult thing to replace is the quarterback position. If you think that you can get a quarterback that's slightly worse than Dak for a lot cheaper, by all means, go ahead and try. But most teams in the league spend every season looking for a quarterback and not finding them. Except for the Green Bay Packers, move on from them, and you're going to be back to Quincy Carter days.
How about the coach? Are you making a change there?
The coach is harder to defend. It depends on who you're going to move on to, but he's a lot harder to defend.
D. Wood, what changes are you making this morning if you're Jerry?
I'm damn sure getting rid of the coach. I'm damn sure getting rid of the coach. I don't want to hear a damn thing. Listen, we talk about, I don't want to hear about no 12-5 wins. That's not it when it comes to the Cowboys. Everything when it comes to the Cowboys is about the postseason. We've been talking about it year after year after year. It's the postseason. What are you going to do in nut crunching time? When everything's on the line, what are you going to do? And yesterday, we saw Matt LaFleur with the youngest team in the league in Green Bay go into Jerry's world where they've been the most dominant team at home of any ball club in the National Football League and absolutely dominate them. And are we expect to run that back? That would be crazy. Guess what? Detroit's not going anywhere. Green Bay's not going anywhere. San Francisco's not going anywhere. I could go on and on. These teams are going to get better in the conference. We just said the Dallas Cowboys, this was their best opportunity in like a quarter of a century to get to the Super Bowl, and they got their ass handed to them yesterday, and we're supposed to run it back? Like, come on, man. Like,
he's right.
Jerry Jones said it himself. Jerry Jones said it himself. He doesn't have much time left, okay? He doesn't have much time left. Running it back would be just stupid. It would be totally stupid to run it back.
Dan, we're about to have, first of all, I co-sign everything Damien Woody just said, and I co-sign his passion for it. Dan Orlovsky, we're going to have Schefter in a couple of minutes. You know what was all over Twitter yesterday. The name Bill Belichick is trending. Do you see any way in the world that there could be a marriage between Belichick and Jerry Jones? Dan?
Oh, absolutely. Now, Coach Belichick would have to be on board with Jerry Jones and the front office, which the front office has done a great job of acquiring talent. He'd have to be okay with that. That's probably needed given what's happened in New England over the past couple years. The biggest question with all of this is going to be this. If the Cowboys move on from Mike McCarthy, and results are what results are, okay? Are you, the next head coach, if that is the case, good with paying Dak Prescott $60+ million? Because if you are, you're going to be hampered a little bit. That's just the truth. Bill Belichick's going to have to be okay with if they choose to pay Dak Prescott $60+ million, when we have the proof of what happens in the playoffs, you're going to have to be okay with that.
Well, you know what else we have the proof?
Yeah.
If Bill Belichick doesn't have a quarterback, he won 4 games this year. He's 29-37 since Tom Brady
he'll
left.
win the Super Bowl next year with Dak.
All I know is I'm taking Dak Prescott. If you have Bill Belichick or anybody else, I'm giving Dak Prescott the money.
All right, everyone stay where you are. Schefter, you saw it. I mean, the whole world is ready to fire Mike McCarthy yesterday, but only one person gets to make that decision. Now, you have reported all along that the way the Cowboys season ended would play a significant role in how this thing turned out. Well, it ended as badly as it possibly could. What do we expect?
Well, everybody's waiting to see what the fallout is today, this week, whenever, because it could come at any time. And everybody wants to see what Jerry Jones ultimately decides. And as you mentioned in the last segment, I don't think he was ready and prepared to have to make this decision today. So he has to process all the information. But as you said there, Greeny, and as I've been told all year long, Mike McCarthy always was going to be judged by how Dallas's last game of the season ended. Well, the last game of the season ended yesterday. It didn't work out well for Mike McCarthy. It didn't work out well for Dak Prescott. It didn't work out well for defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, who's a candidate for other head coaching jobs. So everybody associated with Dallas yesterday was tarred in one way or another. And as I was flying down to Tampa from Bristol, Connecticut yesterday afternoon and watching this game on TV, streaming the game, it reminded me a lot of the Thursday night Chargers-Raiders game when the Chargers were getting blown out, and I must have gotten 20 texts from people across the league saying, Brandon Staley's going to get fired tomorrow. He has to get fired tomorrow, right? I could not believe how much reaction it generated. It was a replay yesterday, flying down with the Dallas Cowboys and Mike McCarthy. Text pouring in. Bill Belichick's on Zillow looking for homes in Dallas. Mike McCarthy's out. They have to make the move. It was a replay. It reminded me so much of that Thursday night. And now it really is up to Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, to decide how they want to handle this. Mike McCarthy's got 1 year left in his contract. It is tough to bring back a coach in the last year of his contract.
Good point.
But I also would say this. He did that with Jason Garrett. He made Jason Garrett coach into the last year of his deal. Don't know that it worked out the way that anybody would have wanted, but he's done that before. I think the feeling around the league is it would be hard to imagine him doing that now, but that's a decision that Jerry and Stephen Jones have to make regarding the future of the Dallas Cowboys. And as you know, as we've heard, people want blood.
Look, he's so bombastic that sometimes we associate him with people like George Steinbrenner, but he couldn't be more the opposite. He's actually shown great patience, sometimes to a fault. Schefter mentioned with Jason Garrett. Nick, you've been fighting back on Dak all morning long, but as far as the coach, if you owned the team, would you make a coaching change?
Well, yeah, I think you have to at this point, given the way that everything is played out and what he said before the game. If he said it's going to be about this last game, it couldn't have been any worse in this last game. So if that's what he said, if he meant it when he said it, he has to follow with that. The Dak conversation, to me, is absurd. Moving on from him in this situation is ridiculous. But Mike McCarthy, yeah, the coach, and when you have failures everywhere, the head coach, somebody's got to pay, and it's normally him.
Rex, Bill Belichick to Dallas. Come on. He's on Zillow. Schefter's been mentioning it. It was all over the place yesterday, but you know this league better than anybody. Is that, if they are going to make a change, does that feel like a sensible direction for them to go?
No, it doesn't. And I'm going to tell you why. Number one, Jerry Jones is the face of this franchise. As soon as you get Bill Belichick in, now he becomes the face of the franchise. Belichick's only going to take a job, in my opinion, where he has complete control of the entire, the personnel, all of that. That's not going to happen with Jerry Jones. So to me, I don't see it happening. Schefter's shaking his head. He knows a lot more about it than I do, but I'm just telling you, in my opinion, it doesn't work.
I could see Schefter out of the corner of my eye as well.
Rex.
We have this. Go ahead, Schefter. No?
Rex, Bill Belichick wants to coach football. If it happened to be in Dallas, if Dallas made the move and Jerry went to Bill and said, I wanted you to come coach the Cowboys, I think Bill would be good with the setup that would be there. I don't think he's going to go in and say, well, you all step aside, I'm going to run this whole thing, or I'm not coming. I don't think it will be like that. Listen, what did Bill Belichick say exactly 1 week ago in the press conference in New England? 1 week ago, he told the reporters there, I don't have to make all the personnel decisions. I'm willing to give up some of that control. He told that to them. That was before they parted ways this week. If an opportunity like Dallas were to come along and he were interested in it, I think he would be willing to collaborate in whatever way it took.
Let me get Dan in. Go,
Listen,
Dan.
I don't know Jerry Jones. Yeah, Greeny, I don't know Jerry Jones at all. Obviously, he's a tremendous owner and businessman. If they run it back, don't tell me you're serious about winning a Super Bowl. Don't tell me you are. You can wordplay all of us in press conference. If you run it back and don't make legit changes, don't say that you actually want to win a Super Bowl. The last 3 playoff runs, you've been whooped by San Francisco. You've been whooped by San Francisco. And you got embarrassing endings of the games. And you got embarrassed by the youngest team in the NFL. And here's the other aspect of this. I'm not calling for coaches' jobs anymore. I did that when I was younger in this profession. I promised to myself I wouldn't do it. But I know this. In this coaching cycle, Mina Kimes made this point 10 days ago. It's Bill Belichick, it's Mike Vrabel, it's Jim Harbaugh, it's Ben Johnson. I mean, this is a world-class coaching cycle right now. You want to stand pat with what you've witnessed? With what you saw yesterday, don't tell me you're serious about winning Super Bowls.
I'm going to say this. First off, Ben Johnson's a different story right there. That makes more sense. Got a superstar possibly in the making. I'm not going to take and Bill Belichick, sure, I get it. This team would be incredible. All right, you got Dak Prescott, a great quarterback and all that. I just don't see it darn happening. We're going to throw away everybody. We're criticizing this guy. They had how many Pro Bowlers?
Yeah.
12 Pro Bowlers? Yeah. They're doing something right in Dallas.
Oh, my gosh, Rex.
They are.
Dan, you don't get to say that you're not calling for people's jobs.
And then call for their job.
Then call up and call for people's jobs. But anyway.
I'm not calling for anybody's job, but they got to fire that
But if
guy.
you're serious about winning a Super Bowl, you better make some changes.
That's right.
Just stand on it.